Yeah, well, we got to figure it out. But yeah, I don't know why there was a cascade of things that happened right when everything was working fine, and the moment we went live, the video started messing up. My computer shut down a lot, and my camera shut down. It was very bizarre. The robots are not happy with us, Lena. So for starters, why don't we just you want to just tell me a little? Hold on.
Uh-oh, more
So
robots.
nope, we're good. I needed to hit record.
Oh,
Minor thing. Yeah, so I'm here with Tessa Lena. Tessa is a musician as well as a writer. She blogs at tessafightsrobots.com, correct?
yes.
Okay.
And also on Substack, tessa.substack.com.
Okay, gotcha. The nice thing about me doing it this way too is I can edit it and it'll actually be a cleaner,
Yeah, yeah.
nicer. The final product will actually be nicer. It's just more work for me. Woohoo!
Yeah, we're all about the final product.
Right. Uh, so, Tessa, you want to tell me a little bit about kind of, what's your background? You said you're from you were born and grew up in Moscow, and then you moved
Yes.
to Chicago. Is that correct?
And then I moved to Chicago, and then I moved to New York, and I'm enjoying myself as much as the circumstance allow right now in New York. But yeah, my background, it's, well, that's a very long story, but music is my own thing. I've been doing that since I was 5. I was doing classical piano and lots of music. And then I decided that I wanted to study Tibetan, and I thought of myself as a Buddhist for a while, which I do not think of myself as such right now. But so I did Tibetan studies. I went to Tibet. I studied linguistics and music, Tibetan music. Then I moved to Chicago after some adventures, and then I had a lot of adventures in Chicago. Then I was kind of, well, I mean, I like New York. I grew up in Moscow, which is why New York is a much more fitting vibe for me. And I've been doing writing also probably all my life, and I did many, many, many things in life to make money. So that's the gist of the story. And then, of course, for the past year, I've been fairly outspoken about this whole pandemic response because I figured that we should, and it's almost like a civic duty because I don't want to go into full dystopia and I feel responsible.
Right. I feel that a lot of people are feeling, well, some people are feeling that. Some people think we're just going to go back to normal here soon. But so, what was it that kind of made you first start to question things? Were you always someone that kind of questioned authority?
Well, let me answer that in the part 2 of my answer. So, specifically last year, what made me question is the fact that I was involved in musicians' rights activism for a few years, and that brought me to research big tech and what they were trying to do, their philosophy, their theology, and various business models that they actually tried on musicians and other creative professionals first. And of course, then people stopped eating because musicians were no longer making money and everybody got completely poor. And I remember back then, I was joking saying that, oh, if they try to apply that model to, say, food or farming, we're doomed. I mean, like, we're completely screwed. Everybody will go hungry. But that was kind of a joke, meaning that nobody thought that they would actually try. And when last year happened, all of a sudden I saw that all those things they were trying to do theologically and in terms of like surveillance and controlling people and merging people with machines and all those things that I have been kind of writing about as in horrible dystopian things that may happen sometime later. They're horrible, but sometime in the future, that's what they're trying to do. All of a sudden, I saw all those things actually happening, and that was surreal because I knew that they were trying to bring everything online: education, medicine, everything we do with each other, talking, communication, entertainment. So that was their long-standing dream, and Googles of the world have been going at it and bullying and lobbying and bribing politicians for quite a while. But that was mostly hidden from the general public. And of course, people are always busy and people have many things to do. And when people in my circles of musicians activism that were trying to bring attention to that, and of course most people went, oh, get a job, like that's too much and that's too dystopian. And so then when it started happening, I was like, oh, but it's not a reaction. No matter what's happening with health, and of course in the beginning I was freaking out about health just like everybody else, but for a very short time, because then I realized that there were too many holes in the narrative, and it was just new holes coming up every day. And in addition to that, it was impossible to live in this neurotic mode. It was just not life. And I kind of snapped out it very quickly. But then all the measures that were suggested, I even had I have to admit, facetious conspiracy theory a year ago saying that those masks that they were trying to force on everybody, that it was really the way of big tech to train the massive population for smart face wearables, because that's what they wanted to do. Computer to brain interface is something that is at frontier currently. They're actively working on that, but how do you convince wide amounts of people to adopt face wearables or brain to computer interfaces? That's impossible. So, but if it's a health measure, then everybody gets trained to wear masks and get used to that. And then a couple of years later, they say, oh, by the way, here we go, here's a smart mask. And even though I did have this conspiracy theory, I did not fully take it seriously, because that just seemed too much. Like that is logical, that is consistent with how they operate, but nonetheless, it is too much, too insidious. And, I didn't want to believe in it myself, but it seems like I've been correct so far with things happening right now, and smart masks actually being created and introduced, and this new thing where there's new contest that was just announced, like a smart innovation mask innovation challenge or something like that. So that is a very long answer to your question, and then I already forgot the question, of course. So that was what was I going to do in part 2? I forgot.
Well, I was asking kind of what was it? Have you always been kind of questioning
Oh,
authority and?
yes. So I guess by nature, yes. By upbringing, the opposite of that. I was raised as a very compliant child, which was not fitting me at all, and that is a much longer story. But essentially, uh, because I was a very good student at school, that became kind of the performance mode, and I guess that is how they raise children. They love was somehow implicitly tied to performance as a student. And people, I'm sure nobody thought about it this way explicitly, but implicitly that was the way. And because every child wants love, I really wanted love. So I was performing and I was very compliant up until a certain point. And then I became the opposite of compliant. And then, of course, that created some kind of problems, as in, and who do you think you are? What do you think is better than everybody else? And like, what are you doing? What is all this? And so I was swinging back and forth between being compliant so as not to ruin all of my relationships in life, and being myself. And I guess now I do not believe that compliance does much good. So I'm not particularly compliant.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, I know for myself and other people who have kind of gone down the rabbit hole, so to speak, it has caused a lot of rift in not being, being defiant or being non-compliant amongst family and friends and different people within your community. Have you experienced some of that?
As of recently, amazingly minimally, because I do value my relationship as such, and I really work with people, as in, I present my perspective. I do not try to make them be like me. I don't think it's a valid approach. I don't think it is spiritually good to force people to think like me. So I insist on being accepted, and I work towards that with people who are extremely important to me. And then, of course, in the broader circle, I do what I can and then I let it be. But either that was love that created a good vibe, or luck, or I don't know. I didn't have too many problems, actually. Some people, very, very few, went militant, and I just let go of them. I don't fight with them. I just let them be. I had to block a couple of people, but only after they started accusing me of things and being ridiculous. Then outside of that, I try to talk to the human side of everybody. And I think that is the only thing that we can do, because ultimately there's a logic to the universe and there's a logic to life and there's a bigger picture that we cannot necessarily see in each moment. And I think it is far more important to allow for free will and to allow for harmony to form with all our love, but on its own terms, than to drag people into my thinking. So I really draw a distinction between protecting myself, which is, I think, everybody is obliged to protect themselves and their soul and their integrity and protect their right to be who they are. And on the other hand, telling others what to do. I do not believe we are really authorized to tell others what to do. So, in other words, I think that I did not have too many issues. Some people, I mean, if I know that they absolutely are not willing to come over to my side right now and they're not in my very close circles, then I just talk to them and I'm patient with them. I think patience is very important. And I try to present my perspective softly, with love, with respect for who they are. And I think everybody comes to their truth on their terms at some point. Sometimes it's very late in life, but I don't think we own others. So
Yeah, that's a good point. And I the free will thing is also a big thing for me. It's like I'm not telling you what to do. Don't force me to do what you think I should do. And I think that if we had a world where people actually had agency, that's a big thing for me. Is just that allowing people to act on their own agency. I think the world would be a lot better place. It'd be a little bit more chaotic. Obviously have like, when when everybody's operating from the same playbook, it can be a lot more efficient. But I think there's a lot that's lost in that approach, and losing the diversity of voices and perspectives, and also the truth. I mean, I don't think the truth comes from a single authority that typically has a lot to gain from a certain outcome, you know. So some of the notes I noted, some of the things we talked about before were the idea of fear and the role that fear plays in a lot of what's going on. What are your thoughts on that?
it is interesting because I was just going to talk about it. I was going to respond to what you said because I completely agree that allowing people to act on their agency is of utmost importance. And I think it is spiritually more important to act from a good place and to respect other people's free will than to make everybody act in a way that I or whoever think is right or correct. I think it is undeniably more important to be true to existential principles and let people be who they are and figure things out with love, and help them if they ask for it, and help them if we think that we can, but also allow them be themselves. And I think fear is the opposite of that. And I think that almost in every case of fanaticism, whether it's, well, I guess I'm talking about well-intended fanaticism, because people who intentionally try to cause trouble, try to intentionally destroy, do evil, that is the entire category. They have a purpose. They have a purpose in society, like any predator. They serve the purpose of making sure that we don't fall asleep. So they're valid. Their existence is valid. However, most people are not like that. But a lot of people end up being fanatical about whatever idea they have because of fear. Because, for instance, if I think that unless I make everybody act the way I think is correct, then I am going to be in danger and the world is going to be horrible. And if I think that my fear is more important than trusting the universe to make things right, while doing my absolutely best to be courageous and loving and brave, if I have this fear, then the chance of me becoming a fanatic in even the best idea is a lot stronger than my chance of not becoming a fanatic. And I think that I actually think about it a lot. And, if it's too much philosophy, then I apologize. But that line that we cross when we start out from a good place and we have this the idea that is good, that is genuinely positive idea, but the moment we cross that line and we decide that we're entitled to force others, to lead others by force, I think that is the moment when a good guy becomes a bad guy in a way. And then, since then, usually then after that, there's a long trajectory of, if that is not caught, if that fanaticism is not curbed, then eventually that person may become a bad leader. And of course, the words like good and bad, they're big words, and I'm using them. Well, they're very generalized words. It's not how I mean them, but I think it is extremely, extremely important to watch out for that fanaticism in oneself. And ultimately, that's something that every human being has an existential right and obligation to do. And I think it's extremely important. And my theory is that once many more people will take responsibility for curbing their own fanaticism, regardless of what their ideas are and regardless what camp they're coming from, I think that is the moment when we'll start actually healing.
How would
can't
you,
heal people by force.
yeah, how would you define fanaticism?
Well, I think fanaticism is something that is, well, let me give an example from history, from very old history. For instance, when the Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten, he decided from his own internals, from his own psychological inner workings, he decided that polytheism as he understood it was wrong, was bad, that it was not theologically correct. And say maybe he did not really understand the traditions that he was considering incorrect. So maybe he didn't have the sensory perspective to understand it. Maybe he didn't do the job to do the necessary work to understand it. Or maybe it was his path to try something else. But so in his head, he decided that it was incorrect. And then by force, he told his people, okay, now you're going to abandon your old ways. Now you're going to believe in God the way I say is correct. And of course, we don't know what was in his head. But from his actions, he might have thought that he was actually correct. He might have thought that he was doing the right thing, that he was bringing the people over to his side of believing in God correctly or celebrating the faith correctly. But as a result, we ended up with more limiting perspectives, more limiting ways of conduct everything, actually do everything in life. The whole world history was changed because that one person came up with this idea and was forceful about this idea. Thus, he was fanatical. Like similarly, leaders of other lands in other countries, they decided that their people wanted to be civilized. And probably their motives were political. They wanted to be cool among the leaders of their own countries. And that applies to more than one world religion. Actually, most world religions were developed this way. And then the leader decided that the people ought to be civilized. They ought to practice something else. They ought to have faith differently and to celebrate their faith differently. And they used force to do that, like blood and violence. And people were forced to do that. And then many generations later, people forgot the trauma and they just know that something's missing and they don't know what it is. And it causes all sorts of sensory issues, all sorts of sensory deprivation. And many of the problems we're dealing with today, in my feeling, they actually derive from all those issues historically that happened many centuries ago. It's just a natural progression. Things get worse and worse and worse and worse and more sensory deprived. And what's happening right now with the attempt to combat nature completely, to disconnect from nature entirely, that is not a new battle, that is an old battle. But it boils down, again, if we really try to trace it to its roots, then the chance is it'll go back to centuries ago when people decided that the product of their brain or their idea was more important than their mysterious connection with nature that they could not control. They wanted to control it. So that's a very long answer again.
Yeah, and it seems like there is this like seismic shift that's happening, and a lot of people don't really understand what that shift is. You know, where it's headed to, and to me, it is a break from not organisms, but like life, be it human life. So it's life, either human life or animal life or plant life not having any inherent rights of itself, like to live. It's just something that's used for the machine. Now we've had this with plants and animals for a long time. We have had a total disregard for other life, but it seems like that system that was built around is now turning on the people, where the people are going to be treated in the similar fashion to the plants and animals have in the past, like you serve this thing or you don't exist. And the idea that you have any inherent right in and of yourself to live or to operate or to choose another path is being erased. You serve this system, and how do you fit in? Where do you fit into serving this economic system? And there's nothing else outside of that. And it's like your
Oh,
rights, what was formerly thought of as rights are now going to be privileges that you need to earn by serving this thing.
I agree with you, and I think it's a very interesting twist because we're kind of going back, if we don't resist, that is. So we are ushered towards feudalism, but that idea of not appreciating people or the majority of people is not new, of course, because this is feudalism, this is slavery, this is all the colonial pursuits that did not appreciate the people unless the people were you, who is a person with a lot of money or a lot of power. And so, like, you are like, the person talking was the only person getting appreciated in a model that existed for centuries. And I think that we had this probably marketing gimmick. Honestly, if you go and look back at how people in the West lived before, say, World War II, uh, factory workers were not doing great at all. The life standards were very low for the majority of people. So there was only this period of time from World War II until maybe 2000 when a lot of people in the West had very high standards of living, and of course at the expense of poisoning the planet and all the wars and all that. But there was this period of time of good life where all of a sudden they were talking about human rights and consumer rights. It was all about consumerism, and what actually happened historically was that when the industrial revolution happened, and then all of a sudden production became very cheap, industrialists have figured out that they would actually benefit more from people having some free time and some spending power because production was cheap. So, and they needed people to actually buy what they produced. And so industrialists amongst themselves decided that, okay, so we do need to make a shorter workday, 40-hour work week, so that people can have some free time during the weekend. They go traveling, they go for a road trip, and which means they need to buy a car. And so the whole system about consumer freedoms and perks and high standard of living for many people was designed around consumer power. It's not because all of a sudden somebody started caring about human rights. And then, of course, from the Western perspective, a lot of troubles created and necessary outside of the Western world, they were invisible, they were hidden. And human nature is such that people usually only care about problems that impact them directly. And I'm saying it non-judgmentally. Every human being is mostly like that. I mean, we start caring about some problems because we're impacted. This is how whistleblowers show up. Because, when we're personally impacted, then we care. But the world is full of injustices, and it's impossible to care about everything. So ultimately, again, we are being taken back to slaves in a way, but maybe more subtly. We'll see. I think that it's really up to us what happens. So, and I think that our aspiring overlords, they are trying to do it subtly, if they can. If they can, then again, we'll see what happens. But it is true that that whole order of many centuries prior to today, where only a handful of people had a good life and had power, and the rest were not really free, and they were either peasants, slaves. They did not have much freedom or much money. We are getting back there if we don't really stand up to that. And of course, it is a far more complex topic than any conversation can actually carry, and because the planet is finite and the resource usage and all that. But I think the problem right now is that the people in with most power and with most money, they have completely lost their minds. And the shift that has happened, that started really happening starting in probably 2001, and that became really, really visible last year, the root of that shift was more in the minds of the super billionaires, because they have decided, they became really worried that the planet is finite, that there's not enough for them, and there's too many peasants. And I think they freaked out. And once they started freaking out actively, they figured, okay, so what do we do? How do we manage all of our resources? And of course, they consider people and trees and animals and minerals and water and everything and air, which is a new frontier of commercial and other, warfare. But they decided that they need to manage those resources more efficiently. And of course, as the technology was developing, up until now, they did not feel like they had the technology to really manage it efficiently enough to their liking. And now they think that AI is going to be their manager, and the technology is finally there. They can take care of it. They can put sensors in all living objects and all living forms, and they can track us efficiently. And because there's so much data, then AI comes to rescue and AI manages us. And there's a lot of demagoguery around it. There's a lot of mythology and marketing tricks. And they're selling us all the marketing tricks. But in reality, of course, they're trying to just manage us efficiently. And I think it's going to fail. I don't think that it's going to work. But unfortunately, as they're trying, there's a chance for a lot of pain being created in the process, and we can see that happening. Like right now, since last year, it is really visible to people in the West. So hopefully a lot more people wake up and just internally, from the internal strength, from the internal love, resist that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it is like I do think it does come down to like the difference between believing in your own heart and your own intuition and your own research and your own community, other people that you actually know and trust, versus believing in this like there's like this outside thing that's like it's on the screen, it's not here. It's almost like we're we've given our own I'm trying to think of how to word this. We're believing in these people from far away, as opposed to closer to home. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, I have a theory that as human beings, we're not designed to live in very big communities and to have empires for sure, because we can only relate to that many people biologically, just physiologically. We can only consciously relate to that many people. And then when it becomes more people than we can relate to, we just shut down as an overloaded system. And then, of course, it's hard to think about people who live far away from a different culture. And probably the bigger the spirit, the more people think about people everywhere. But it's hard, even on the everyday basis. We all use things that were manufactured creating havoc. Like I'm talking on the phone right now, and children in Africa had to mine toxic chemicals, toxic and precious metals, to enable me to use this phone. And in my ideal life, I would not use this phone. That would be my ideal. But then I have to stop eating because I need this phone to make money too. And we are all put in this situation where the entire life, the entire way of eating and making money and making connections, it's dependent on bigger things that are in turn rooted in very broken things, creating pain. And I think it is a process of healing that will get us out of there. And it took us so many centuries to get to this broken state. So the chance is that the change is not going to happen overnight. And I think the intention of really, really, really putting our souls in doing our best is what's going to get us out eventually. And it is everyday courage, and it is not glamorous. The thing is, there's this American model where like spiritual quests are supposed to be glamorous, like you're this character in a movie that is a central part. You're starring this movie with all those heroic events. But in reality, it's not like that. It's not glamorous. It's, you scream and cry and you feel alone and you do your best and you feel like an idiot and you try again and then you feel like an idiot and you try again. And sometimes you're misunderstood, oftentimes, and nobody sees it and it's just sweat and tears and it's not glamorous. But I think that's what we need to do. And in the end, we'll see the fruit of it. And then we'll still have to continue working in it. But I don't think there's other way. I think that perhaps being afraid of this process is what tempted people a long time ago to disconnect from nature to begin with, because doing things natural way is not necessarily easy and it's not glamorous. It's work, and people are lazy. So that's another long answer.
Yeah. Well, I've been reading. I'm trying to get through all of Klaus Schwab's books and trying to wrap my mind around, the mentality that's driving all of this. And I've also been, for my work, I've been doing some jobs within the crypto space, and I have some major issues with the cryptocurrencies. Although most of the people that I've worked with, they're actually really good people who have really great, visions, and they want to make the world a better place. I think there's something structurally wrong with that, though. That the difference between like a more natural, like organic kind of mindset of like, I'd say earth-based versus kind of like, oh, our problems are technological in nature. We need a better technology to solve this problem, as opposed to the idea that I think our problem is human, and there's something about our connection to each other and to ecology and to the future, and it has nothing at all to do with technology, and technology just kind of adds another layer to it, but it's still there, and unless we deal with that, we're going to continue down this path, which, by the way, is it's to say it's anti-life. I think it's a very accurate thing to say, because they even say we're going to change what it means to be human. We want to merge, technology and biology. We want to merge man and machine, and also in the process, we see just how much life is being decimated on Earth, and converted into this technology. And I always like the quote from Neil Postman. Do you know Neil Postman?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the quote was, with technologists, they always talk about what we gain, but never about what we lose. And I think that that's a really valuable thing to think about, that we really are losing something here. And I don't think that most people have really like acknowledged that, and like probably don't even believe it, really. Like it's not even a part of their consciousness,
I agree with you, and I think that the problem really is human. So, as far as say crypto, blockchain, all that, I was laughing at it for years in my musicians' activism, anti-big tech plight, and it was just actually funny. And when it was considered a really cool thing to do, and I even went to some events where people were rather fanatical about it. They were actually rather fanatical about it. So. I do think that the problem is not either for technology or against technology. Again, if a lot of people attend to their internals, which is work, again, and I want to reiterate again, it's not glamorous at all. It's actually difficult and not glamorous. But if our hearts are healed, then we will we will use technology significantly wiser. And we're not going to solve anything by adopting a technology, and we're not going to solve much by banning a technology by force. There is, for instance, a movie that is not many people know about it, but I am completely I admire that film. It's a Bangladeshi film called Television, and how do I do this without actually spoiling the plot? So it's about a small village in Bangladesh, and the religious leader who is trying to take care of the souls of the people in this village by banning them from watching television. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to say more, but I highly, highly recommend watching it. It's extremely moving, and I don't think that we can again solve any problem investing in technology. This is obviously just silly, because honestly, even if the internet never showed up and the telephones never showed up, and we could have very, very full lives and happy and have good relationships and probably better quality lives than now. But at the same time, if we just say that we are going to stay broken, but we are going to ban this technology, I don't think it's going to work, because everything people do, including in technology and in art and in science and in every area, we try to express our creativity that we were born with. And again, my theory even about technical psychopaths, who I don't like at all, and I don't like them at all, but I think what they do is, in a very misguided way, they're expressing their nature-given creativity, because it is human nature to try to make an impact, to try to do something that is new, that nobody has been done, and something that is mine, essentially. And if it comes from a place of spiritual balance, and if the person retains humility and the deeper feeling that we are a part of the universe, and we have absolutely no way to know the bigger picture in its complete entirety. It's not possible. That's not what we're here for. We cannot do that. But we can have this feeling, and we can connect, and we can be creative, we can create beautiful things, and we can do our best to be in harmony with the world. Then the result of that kind of creativity, that again requires work. I mean, I keep saying that, but that kind of creativity requires humility and work. But then the result is beautiful, and then the communities are healthy, then the relationships are good. But if human beings don't take care of that work, if we don't know how to heal ourselves, we don't know how to heal others, we're just stuck with all this trauma, with all the confusion, with all the ambitions, with thinking that unless we prove to be successful in the modern understanding of that, meaning money and power, then nobody's going to like us. And that's a terrible feeling. And then whatever creativity we are born with, we invest it into silly things or destructive things. And I think that the solutions, again, lie in the heart, in humility, and in trying to restore this connection, which is a mysterious process. There's no formula for that. There's no formula for that at all.
Well, you say restore the connection, and it's interesting because what I feel like is happening right now is a major disintegration, and not just of like the economic system and our governmental systems and everything like that, but amongst human beings. I think that there's a division that's happening right now that's really tragic. And I know, like, there's a lot of dehumanization that goes on of others based on where they're coming from. And I've had some people, and I've talked a lot about this, but it's people extremely angry at me that feel that I'm doing harm to people by having the perspective that I have, not even getting into the fact that it's actually
Right.
it's backed by incredible amounts of evidence that people don't want to actually face and look at. But also too, I've also felt anger and disgust at my fellow human beings. I go to the grocery store and I just look around at everybody and I'm just like, my blood boils. I'm just like, I'm really, because I see where this is headed, and it's hard for me not to just like, oh, let bygone, let everyone just be their, whoever they are or whatever. You have this thing that's coming, that you see this thing coming that's really, really dark, and most people don't see it. All they see is the narrative that they're being told, and in terms of how you create some sort of unity when the differences of understanding of what's actually happening are that vast, that there's such a huge chasm between those things, and it seems to be growing. I thought over time, people will start to come around and see, okay, yeah, maybe there's something a little bit off here. But I see people just like digging in, really. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it is a very important topic, and obviously it's not black and white at all, and there's no single answer. But I've thought about it a lot, and actually I think about it daily, and I have feelings about it all the time. Uh, First of all, it's very understandable to feel anger about that, and the propaganda is just massive. The propaganda that we are subjected to is absolutely disgustingly massive, and unfortunately, it works. And what is happening is this absolutely abysmal and disgusting state and corporate abuse. That is, it is horrible. It is really bad. But I have a few stories in response. At some point, I was in a very very abusive relationship, and I was very young, and my ego was big in terms of going to a very good school, considering myself very smart, and abuse could never happen to me. So, and I went all the way in. I went all the way in. I was in denial. I did not. I had no idea how to deal with it. I had no idea how to even come to agreement internally that something abusive could be happening to me, to the smart person with all good schools and connections and social doings. And so I did not admit to that until it was extremely late, and until the situation was absolutely horrendous and actually dangerous. So that, and then walking back and trying to heal over that, which took many years and a lot of work, I started thinking, like, why it was so obvious. The abuse was obvious. There was every sign of it. Things were completely weird. They were abnormal. They were crazy. They were disrespectful with me. They were bad, and yet I was looking for excuses. Not looking. My brain was finding explanations of, well, okay, this is not so bad, or maybe I was wrong, or maybe I misunderstood. This is physiology. This is how stress impacts people, and I that taught me to not blame people who are in denial of the abuse that they have been subjected to, because I've done it myself, and I'm not the most gullible person in the world, and nonetheless I did it. So when other people are subjected to abuse for the very first time, and they were comfortable, they had that idea that America has a democracy, and that we are in a very good place, and our government would never do something horrendous like that to us. And that is a very pleasant state of mind. So, because it is a pleasant state of mind, it is very hard to part with it, even when senses and facts are in contradiction. Still, the brain works in such a way that it tries to come up with the most pleasing story, the story that makes you feel the most important, the most loved, and or at least the most sane, the most right. Maybe less so love, but right. So that if the brain tries to prove that I'm correct, that my story is correct. So for that reason, I think that kindness is the only way. Unless, of course, when people get obnoxious and aggressive, then you just treat them like, okay, so they're a little bit sick right now, they're a little bit crazy right now, so maybe it's best to stay stay away from them. But anger, I think, is not a good emotion no matter what. It comes up, it's a natural feeling, then you deal with it. So, I mean, like, you come up with rituals for yourself. You do something in nature, you try to cleanse yourself, you try to be good. Meaning good not as in approved by others, but internally come to balance. And then interact with others from a place that is not angry. And as far as the bigger picture, it is like what I'm about to say is it's a lot easier said than done. But I think with an internal feeling of wisdom of life, it is a lot easier to handle, because if you assume that you're here for a reason, and all of us, I believe, are here for a reason, and the reason we are born in this time, in this challenging, very, very strange time, again, that there's a reason for that, and which means we're prepared to deal with it, to figure it out, even though it might be difficult and painful, and we need to cry and kick and scream and look for solutions and pray and do all those things, but we have the internal capacity to deal with it in the best way. And I think that this situation is calling for us to really look on the inside and look for that peace of mind and confidence and faith in the universe, in nature, in, if anybody has a religious belief, then in whatever way they believe. I think that's the only way to deal with it that is not going to drive us crazy. Because if you try to approach it from the perspective that is purely logical, in which we assume that, okay, this is what's happening, things are horrible, this whole dystopia is happening, they're destroying nature, they are doing, smart dust, smart fabrics, all those nanoparticles, nano robots, like geoengineering, all this pollution, it's horrible. There's no way one human being can figure out how to deal with it. It is horrifying, it is destructive. But if we trust nature to be able to take care of all of that, assuming we treat her with respect, assuming that we do not allow ourselves to be cowards, assuming that we work with our trauma, we work with our anger, and we really make sure that we heal ourselves and we help others heal to the best of our ability, because there's no formula for that. There's nobody that is going to combine and say, oh, like, good job, now you pass this, you pass this, you get an A grade. It's not how it works. So you'll feel internally that something is moving forward. But I think that we are looking at a tremendous, tremendous opportunity to really reconnect with the spirit in the most sacred way. And I'm not talking about any particular religion or any particular way of believing, because, we all have our own. But for a while, for a long time, people have been trying to separate from nature. People have been trying to live in fantasy that was feeding their ego, that was feeding their stories. And there was nonetheless a lot of beauty that came as a result of it. The people, the art that comes from pain, that comes from the desire to be pure. I mean, that is all ultimately beautiful in many ways, but there are healthier ways to go about it. And maybe we're just given another opportunity to see humanity in each other and to connect to the spirit and try to be wise and humble. Because the way I look at it, we are going through something that is similar to a religious reform. Like, for instance, when Europeans came to the Americas or to Africa or to other places, and again, Europeans were not the only one doing that. They're the most familiar face of colonization, but they definitely weren't the only ones. But when they came to all those places, and local people from all the places that were invaded, they had no idea how to deal with it. And they had to go through this completely weird reform that was forced with violence and deceit and divide and conquer. And it was probably a very puzzling experience for people facing those colonizers, because Europeans brought in a different way of thinking, a different way of looking at life. And it was impossible for local people to know that from the get-go. So I think what we're looking at right now is correcting of all of that in a way that is possibly new to human history, or maybe to non-human history, that we have to invent it from our hearts right now, all of us. And looking back, we see that divide and conquer really didn't work out for the locals. Because when different leaders of different nations are put against each other and all old rivalries are exploited, then what happens in the end? In the end, the invader wins. So if we allow ourselves to be divided right now on petty disagreements or on egos, or I think that we're done. I think that then we have no chance.
Yeah,
I
a
think
couple of things on that. Go ahead.
yeah.
Oh,
I don't know. I mean, sorry. Go ahead.
no, that's okay. No, a couple thoughts came up with what you were saying, which was, one of them is interesting because the world leaders, if you want to call them that, like, the people that are ruling over us, that's kind of the language that they use of, like, we're in this together and we need to come together and all of us need, but what it really means to them is that, you all need to come together and submit to our will. So like their idea like of singularity basically means the elimination of everyone as an individual, and everyone comes together and serves this thing, as opposed to what I think you're talking about, which is everyone coming together as individuals with free will and a heart and a mind and working together collaboratively, as opposed to working together on this project that none of us actually had anything to do with its creation, or you know what I mean? Like it's
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and I agree with you completely. So, but I don't want to interrupt you. So say what you wanted to say, and then.
oh, I was just thinking a lot about I've been listening to a lot of the technologists and the technocratic folk. They talk about kind of this coming together of like like a singularity, and it's just and what it really means to me is the elimination of all these other things, and to creating a unit, that none of its individual parts really had. The book I'm reading right now is the Klaus Schwab's Stakeholder Capitalism, which just came out
Mhm.
about a month ago. And that's really what it is. It's like they're talking about, hey, there are all these stakeholders. So it sounds good on paper. Hey, we need to start thinking about the environment and poor people and the people that work in the factory. That sounds great. But they're not actually giving any agency or any real power to any of the stakeholders. It's actually doing the opposite. The system that they're pushing forward is actually concentrating power even to a greater degree. But they trick people because they call it decentralized. Well, yes, the administration of it is going to be decentralized on the blockchain, but the rules, the rules that everyone has to go by, were created by a certain group of people, and then we're just supposed to submit to those rules and submit to that system, and then we get our badges and we can pat ourselves on the back for being a stakeholder or whatever. But it is, I'm kind of rambling here a little bit, but yeah.
Well, I mean, Schwab, for one, is a liar. So, whatever he says, whatever, and he's not the only one. And so is Ray Kurzweil. And actually, I have a joke that, well, it's a little bit cruel, but I've been saying for some time that I want to write a song about Ray Kurzweil on his deathbed. And I'm not going to do it because I respect his agency and I respect him as a human being, although I absolutely do not respect what he does and his ideas and what he's trying to do. But, that's a big question actually, whether transhumanists believe genuinely transhumanists on a high level. I'm not talking about regular transhumanists who I'm sure are sincere, but transhumanists on a very high level, whether they actually believe in things like immortality. You know what? I used to think that they do, but now I doubt it. I think it's just a gimmick that they tell others. Out of all sales propositions, actually completely ridiculous. Like try selling immortality to people, or it is so ridiculous. But their idea of unity, they are stealing words. Like, for example, going back to my Soviet childhood, and I grew up at the ruins of the Soviet Union, but I mean, like, I do remember, I do remember the vibe and all those posters about respected, happy workers and peasants and this dignity that was theoretical. But, posters and slogans about human rights and everything is for the people and everything is by the people, that was everywhere. And yet it had nothing to do with reality. So they're kind of restoring this level of propaganda and this particular style, which is actually trippy to me because I remember that style and that way of thinking being left out of the room and celebrate. The laughing out of the room was celebrated collectively by everybody. It was like a spiritual upheaval. And all of a sudden, all those tricks are here. And I see them on the screen and in real life, and all this, happy essential workers, and this is ridiculous. And this is not true. I mean, there's a big difference between unity that comes from trusting the universe, trusting nature, trusting the bigger picture, and trusting the fact that if we actually start acting on our hearts in earnest, with courage, with love, then somehow mysteriously things will come together. And it doesn't mean it's going to be all kumbaya, it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, but it's going to be significantly more grounded, significantly healthier than it is right now. And each individual has to really attend to internals. That's the most important thing, and to be courageous in our everyday life and like to do the work. But this is entirely different from that fake unity nonsense that the liars are coming up with. And I have to again distinguish between the liars upstairs, such as Gates or Schwab or any of those wonderful people. So they are their own category. They are psychopaths. But then sometimes people are on the ground. They actually like the language. And who wouldn't like the language of justice and equity and sustainability? That is very good language, but unfortunately, it has been stolen. And all those words mean the opposite of what they're supposed to mean. And if you look at, for example, and again, languages, I get very fired up about language because that's my thing. But if you talk about like sustainability, sustainable agriculture, what any normal person would imagine, that would be a little organic garden, indigenous kind of farming, that is old, not particularly technological, free from pesticides, free from GMOs, and that would be sustainable. But when they say sustainable agriculture, they mean robots and sensors and satellites and GMOs and gene editing. That has nothing to do with sustainability, so they're stealing language. And I think it would be very good if we just reclaimed it, if we just laughed at them. And I think that laughing at them is actually a much better method than being afraid of them. Because imagine, like they're clowns. Look at them. They're honestly trolling, and like Schwab. The way he looks, even, it's like God. It's unreal. But if we are allowed to laugh at the Naked King, then I think we'll be in a much better shape. Because what they're saying, it's outrageous. What they're trying to do is outrageous, and they know it, and they're scared. And because they're scared, they are so forceful, and there's all this propaganda and all this censorship and all those. They're teams of highly paid experts, probably analyzing every word and coming up with every word combinations that then is being used in the media and everywhere. It's done skillfully. There's a science to language, like neurolinguistic programming and all that. It used to be used a lot in sales, and actually I studied it because I was curious. And it's not, none of it is coincidental. And all those phrases, like even conspiracy theory, which of course, like what the history of the phrase is, it's all a coordinated effort, and we just got to laugh at them because they're ridiculous.
Yeah, and I like that you brought up the conspiracy theory, because I know, one of your articles, perhaps even more, but one of them that I read the other day was you did kind of bring up how everything's a conspiracy. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about that, and kind of how that language has been kind of weaponized against people and shuts down thought, and just, to me, it's just kind of absurd to the whole rhetoric around it just seems just ridiculous. Like conspiracy theorists, it's like, how do you think the world operates? Like,
Well, exactly. Everything in history is essentially a conspiracy, meaning that usually people get together and agree to do things, and then they try to do that thing that they agreed upon. And usually people do not necessarily share it with everybody else. Thus, it is a conspiracy. So by definition, history moves forward by virtue of various conspiracies. There's nothing conspiratorial about the existence of conspiracies. I was trying to be funny, but true. There's nothing conspiratorial about the existence of conspiracies. This is human history. And what do you think, that people with money and power today are different, so they don't get together and figure out how to benefit themselves, and probably at the expense of everybody else, just because this is how the world usually works? So making it into a crazy idea that, oh my God, you don't trust the corporation, you don't trust Bill Gates, you don't trust Schwab. What's wrong with you? You're so crazy. That idea that we're supposed to really look to corporations for spiritual guidance, for helping us, for saving us. This is such a ridiculous idea. But again, it didn't just show up. Just, I think maybe even 10 years ago, it was perfectly fine to criticize Gates. Nobody would think you're crazy. They're like, of course you criticize him. He's a billionaire. And you're like, well, obviously he's up to no good, right? And by the way, like I knew one very, very, very spiritually grounded billionaire in my life. That happens. But most of them are not good at all. They're broken people. And so when we're not allowed to to criticize them, it is clearly we are being subjected to a campaign. And it was perfectly fine to criticize Big Pharma in the past. Everybody knew that, of course, Big Pharma is trying to get us. Of course, they're just trying to make us sick and then sell us the cure. That was common knowledge. And especially among artists, which is another thing that is off topic, but I think that a lot more artists should be talking about what's happening right now, because that's what artists are for. But all of a sudden, here, we're in this sterilized atmosphere, when all of a sudden criticizing corporations and human sexuality and human touch and human contact, they're all taboos. And if you are in a respectable environment, and if you even say that, oh, like Bill Gates, maybe his motives are not very pure, even if you don't go into the very dark stuff, if you say something critical, then all of a sudden you start growing a clown nose. And that is a result of obvious manipulation. We are subjected again to the marketing campaign, so that we don't think. And of course, the conspiracy theory, the term, that's known, that it was a memo sent to media outlets to promote that, so that people don't talk about the assassination. So that was a thing. But and now that's fake news. That's the conspiracy theory too. Oh, but if we get out of this stress-induced physical condition, and then we think about it rationally, of course, it should be fine to have a debate about, well, anything really, because, for example, if I were to think that all the pandemic measures are fine, which I don't, obviously, I don't think that, but if I were to think that, why would I have any objections to debate? To hearing out scientists that have a different perspective. The fact that the debate is not allowed is in itself a sign that things are not healthy, that something's up, that something's not right. That alone. And of course, there are many other things. So the fact that censorship exists is a sign that things are not clear, that things are dirty. And I find it tragic, actually, that many people somehow have adopted that notion that by saying things that do not coincide with the establishment narrative, that is dangerous. That to me is tragic. I'm all up in arms about it, because any person who, especially people who consider themselves intellectuals, the purpose of an intellectual, the whole life function of an intellectual is to use this part, to use the brain, and to use it objectively. So not allowing debate, or feeling intimidated by the fact that somebody is expressing an opinion that is dangerous. And that goes back to what you said, that some people accused you of being dangerous by virtue of expressing your views. That, the only thing that it really indicates is that the person is in a deeper state of fear. And it is fear talking, not the person. And that fear was generated by, again, all those people in high-end marketing rooms and highly paid PR agencies and political marketers and, all sorts of alphabets. And they know what they're doing. They're not idiots. They know how to subject people to extreme stress by pounding them with messages of fear. And I have a story about fear marketing. Like I mentioned that I did study marketing, because you're a musician, and then everybody says, oh, you have to, and you have to eat. So, but I actually studied marketing in depth, and there was one particular marketer. He was selling kind of like black hat marketing, and I didn't like him. I'm not into that. I was actually I was like, oh, this is really crappy. But then I got in that webinar where I just wanted to understand. I wanted to understand the mentality, and I was sure I was not going to buy his product. I was positive. I didn't like it. I was determined to absolutely not buy it. About 5 minutes into the call, I bought it, and after I bought it, I was like, oh, what did just happen? I had no intention whatsoever. I specifically did not want to buy it, and then of course I returned it. So the guy didn't win, but what happened there was that he subjected me to stress. That was a campaign on his part. So the whole spiel about how if you don't do this, you're going to miss out, and everybody else is going to make money, and you're going to be poor, you're going to die of hunger. And I'm exaggerating, but essentially that's the narrative of you're going to be alone, you're going to be stupid, you are not your best self because you're not buying this thing. And that's how fear-based marketing works. And I think that it's almost unfair to blame people for going for that, because people who are doing it onto us, they are not well intended. And I'm talking about the high level, because lots of people on the ground and even in the middle, they don't really know what they're doing. I mean, they think they're doing something else. But people on the very high level, they know exactly what they're doing. And they are using mechanisms that impact us on the biological level, like by creating this continuous stress, which is why I think that for any of us who has the strength and the wisdom and the love to counter that, what is the best strategy in my opinion, and of course that's subjective to me, but I believe in it strongly. I think the best strategy is to approach the people who have not yet snapped out of this whole hypnosis situation, to treat them with love and be patient with them, and try to work with them on their terms. And just, and it's not, again, it's not a science, it's something that is art. It's something that is an art of just doing things in case by case. I'm not, for instance, into like turning the other cheek. I don't think it's a good idea, but just have the strength and not take it personally when they're acting silly, and just try to be loving. I don't know, does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and it's also, I look at this thing and I'm like, the powers that we're up against are so massive and so great, and they've got their ideology is so entrenched in society that it does feel like kind of like a losing battle. And I think you're right. Like throughout all of it, we need to not lose our humanity. And maybe that's really the battle that we're in, is to, maintain our integrity in terms of, there's no way I could ever like agree to this. It's just not even an option. Like, I don't believe, I don't trust these, the corporations, the politicians, the philanthropists involved. I know too much about, what they've done in the past, and the massive holes in the narrative that they're feeding us. And I also mentioned to people that, that doesn't mean I have the truth. It's a lot easier to debunk something than to prove something. But I can show you that, that what we're being told is not true. Now, getting into the actual truth of things is a whole nother story. But I think at the end of the day, we need to figure out a way to make sure that, if we as a society, if this break that is happening amongst families, amongst communities, amongst friends, if that is allowed to go forward, I think that will even be more devastating than whatever it is, whatever system that they put into place. To you earlier, you mentioned the word slavery, and I don't think that that's an exaggeration. I think that that's actually obviously it's very different than what we've seen in the past, but essentially, if you don't have autonomy over your own body, or over your own freedom of movement, or your own choice of work, obviously the choices that we're going to be allowed are becoming much and much more limited. And so, it's keeping our humanity in all of this, I think, maybe should be a priority, even more than just winning the argument. Because even me, like I said, I kind of feel like it's I hate to say it, but I feel like at this point it's kind of a losing battle. I'm not as optimistic as you are about, they're not going to be able to get away with it. Because I'm like, I can't believe that they've gotten away with what they've gotten away with. I mean, that just, it blows my mind. Like every day I go out and I'm just like, I can't believe this. I can't fucking believe this is actually happening. But it's happening. And so I don't know. But the human part of it, I think that's one thing that I can hold on to and say, that is a battle that I think you can win. But the challenge is to be able to win it while not while not being disingenuous. Because if I were to just go along with everything, I would be being disingenuous, and I want to maintain my genuineness, but also maintain my compassion and humanity for others, and recognizing where they're coming from. So.
Oh, absolutely. And sun came up in agreement because it was so dark and gloomy for most of our conversation. Now the sun came up, and
Ah,
so the sun is in agreement with that. That's good.
thank you, son.
But I agree that we're definitely, and I'm not saying that they're not going to really try to go along with that. And I also think that slavery is not an exaggeration, because this whole digital slavery is, I mean, it's a real thing. And but I think that the battle is really about our humanity, and I think that nature is going to take care of the bigger picture. And I genuinely believe that. So it is not a lofty thing that I'm saying that is just, like fluffy. I do think that if we are responsible, if we take responsibility for our internals and for the courage and for the love and for the compassion, for the wisdom and for the humility, if many people actually really invest the effort into internals, then I think nature will take care of all those billion years and whatever they're trying to do. Because if you look at it, really, they are, whatever money, whatever power they have, whatever technology they have, they're still mere mortals. And nature is so much more powerful than any of us, really. And it is patiently waiting. Nature is patiently waiting for us to get our shit together. And she's waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And that's what we're in the middle of. But I think that if we really act with love, again, not a cheesy thing, it doesn't mean denial of what you feel. That's actually the opposite of that. I think courage is doing what your heart requires, and definitely not going along with it as in, like, I'm not going along with it at all. Like, I talk about it all the time, I write about it all the time, I try to do everything in the physical world that is normal and human, that is not, Bill Gates' tale.
You mentioned about the sales, kind of like sales tactics, and
Uh-huh.
I actually, for many years of my life, that's what I did was sales. I sold everything from electronics to vacuum cleaners to life insurance. I was a telemarketer for Time Life libraries, selling books and
Oh,
CDs. It was awful, and it was like I'd call and there'd be like some little old lady that was just happy to have someone to talk to. So I'd be, talking, like I didn't want to hang up on this lady because she was just like happy to have someone to talk to. And my manager's like, "You got to get rid of these calls, man. You're like spending too much time." I'm like, "It was a little old lady that probably had no one to talk to." But I was like the worst salesperson ever. Like I was awful because I was honest and I was like super nice. And I didn't like to play the tricks, like that you
right.
mentioned. There was a lot of tricks that were involved. And I noticed the people that did well in the sales were well versed in some of those tactics and techniques that I could never do it. And then the other thing is I like I need to absolutely believe in what I'm selling. And a lot of times I'm just like, yeah, this is not so good here. I'm so critical. So yeah, that was a fail, but I kept trying, because that was the potential to make money was always the greatest in sales, but not if you're not very good at it.
Well, that's for sure. But actually, I do think that it would be very good if everybody studied marketing and sales, because then if people studied it, they would actually go for that a lot less. Because then, I mean, like when somebody is trying to do something. Actually, like one time I went, going slightly off topic, although not really. I went to an event that was led by one of the Extinction Rebellion people, and I went with an open heart because obviously, environment, nature. I mean, any normal human being would support the environment. That's just healthy, right? So
Yeah.
I went with an open heart. And then all of a sudden, I see this guy doing every NLP trick in the book on us. And I was stunned, and I was the only one resisting because but I recognized what he was doing. And I was like, wow, I mean, like, that's really interesting. because it was like, feel how anxious you are about everything that is happening, like concentrate on your anxiety. I mean, like, no, like just like cut it out. But I mean, I didn't say that because whatever, like a friend of a friend. But I, I was so, like, that was so obvious. The campaigning was so obvious that I was just like, oh man, I mean, like, horrible. But yeah, so it would be good if people studied it, because then people would be like, oh, you're selling, like, get out, or at least like la 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 la. So,
Yeah.
but
And
because
that's it
because
too,
not,
like
yeah,
knowing who to listen to, and that's I kind of been more leaning more and more toward, that of just like, don't even beyond just like trying to, like, if you agree with me or disagree with me or whatever, like first, like, recognize who's talking to you, and who they represent, or and how, like, are they the people on the TV that are giving these opinions? They're not their opinions. They're scripted. Like, they have these meetings and they have people that basically give them a script. So it's like knowing to who to listen to, I think, is a big part of the battle.
no, absolutely. And since you mentioned TV, and then something came up in our early conversation that we meant to talk about, and then all the technical difficulties showed up, so I think we forgot. But speaking of television and censorship, remember I mentioned that I absolutely cannot stand Rachel Maddow because she is a female. She's kind of like a female Donald Trump, so she has all the same. And I'm neutral. Like, I am an equal opportunity disliker of propagandists. So I have no partisan affiliations whatsoever. I get along with people who like Trump or Biden or anything. I don't care. Like, as far as people's preferences, I just get along with human beings. But as far as politicians or media figures themselves, I think that Rachel Maddow is horrible. And she has been denigrating my people, Russians, for years. And that, in fact, cost me, the environment that she was recreating, where Russian people were suspicious and not to be trusted. And any opinion that I express, it might be actually disqualified just because I'm Russian. I mean, like, I did not like it one bit. It actually, it impacted my life. It was horrible. But at the same time, I would not want to censor her. Like, I would want people to be able to argue. I would challenge her greatly. I would have a debate with her, and but I would not want to say, okay, now she's banned, even though I think that her presence was rather toxic, at least in the past 4 years. So I think that is the essence of respecting free will, because if you see somebody saying things that are doing things that are awful, so then I think it's healthy to oppose them. It's healthy to argue with them. It's healthy to, prove that they're wrong. But just censoring them,
Yeah.
then you kind of start walking over the dark side, and then it's like that same virus that was ailing them is now ailing you. So the virus is still there. It's just present with a different person. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because, I mean, watching what's happening with Donald Trump is really wild. I mean, I cannot stand Donald Trump. I think he's just I don't like the guy. I mean, I agree with people's disgust on the left with Donald Trump, but I don't agree with what they're doing with that disgust, which is to celebrate censorship. And I think that he should have a voice, and he should be able to share his views. Now, where the difference is, though, the challenge is we have a system, we have media systems where certain voices are elevated and drown out other voices, and that's where it becomes a problem. Like Rachel Maddow, like who knows what Rachel Maddow, how much of that is actually her view? I mean, or she's just serving different agendas? Because I view her just as a straight up propagandist. I don't even look at like, oh, what does Rachel Maddow think? I watch her show just like I would watch someone's show on Fox News and say, she's speaking on behalf of power, be it corporate
Right.
power, banking power, political power. She's speaking on behalf of power, and I don't even view that as a human being that's sharing their views as. No, I view her as a human being, but in that role, in that position,
Right.
I don't view her as someone who's or any of these pundits for that matter. I don't view them as individual people who are acting on their own agency, just sharing their opinions. I think that they're serving power, and they're part of, what they want all of us to be, is to be part, fit into this system, like a super organism. We're supposed to serve like the super organism, and the super organism happens to be non-organic. It happens to be technological, and it happens to be legal, and it happens to be financial, but it's not an organic organism, so to speak. But so that's just my big difference is yes, I wouldn't want her or anyone else to be banned. I think everyone should have a platform to share their views, but I also don't think that certain voices should be elevated to such an extreme degree, and also like replicated, because what they do is they send out their messages. This person, it'll be in a Hollywood movie, and it's this the marketing of it is really, I think, sophisticated in terms of how they change. It's not easy to change people's views, especially to get them to go against, I think, would probably be their natural inclination, which is to be opposed to war and to be more compassionate toward people. So you want to turn people xenophobic and hateful and fearful. I think there's a lot of effort that goes into that, and I think it's very sophisticated. But they use these people on the media, these pundits or different people, to that end. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely, I agree with you. There's a machine. I mean, the public opinion as we know it, it's not organic at all. It is a result of coordinated efforts in marketing, and I suspect that it's been this way for a while. It's just that, for one, I think that if you're just born into the system, then the perceptions of a very young person are different. So you kind of assume that the things that you imbibe as you grow up, that's natural, that's how things are. And then as you become older, then you look at it and you think, oh, that was bullshit, that was bullshit, that was bullshit. Like, for instance, in my case, I have figured out relatively recently that the idea of that sacred Western rock and roll, that idea that was very sacred to me when I was a teenager, that was bullshit, because that was the precursor to current identity, identity system. And when you're a teenager, then you like this band, which means you're one of my people, and if you like that band, that means that you're one of those people. And for that, I guess for a teenager, it's fine. But now the system is applied to everybody else, like politics or literature, or you like Michael Eden. Oh, Michael Eden. Oh my God, then you're one of those people. So it's really grown. But even as it was applied to specifically Western rock and roll, that was a kind of an area of my very sacred, very warm feeling when I was a teenager. That was all a lie, because now you see those people. Going into I got this email, and I want to write an article about it. I just never got to writing it. David Byrne and social distance dancing. What the fuck? Like, artists are not supposed to be promoting social distancing. That's bullshit. And what kind of a community feeling is it? And then, of course, maybe they believe that we're really in this horrible health challenge. But they have brains, they can read. So maybe that whole idea, that whole idol of Western rock and roll, maybe that was bullshit too, and I think it was now.
Yeah, I was always
Maybe,
into punk, and it's
yeah,
like all these old, aging punk stars from the back in the day, which are, punk is supposed to be, anti-government,
I,
anti-authoritarian, individualist liberty, and like uh and human rights, those are supposed to be like the ethics of punk, and now they're all just getting in line, like get your jab, get your jab. It's really disgusting.
it is fascinating, but I think again, people, and I went through this whole phase where, like, oh my God, wow, what the fuck, what the fuck, I mean, I went through that phase, and I live in East Village, and it's all aged, like older punks in masks. So it's really, really, really strange. But then I'm thinking this is a reaction of an innocent person towards abuse. That kind of a massive abuse for the first time in their lives. They have no comparison line. They have no idea what to deal with it, like what to do with it. And if we were to take the narrative on face value, like we are in the middle of this horrible pandemic still, and asymptomatic transmission is a thing, and it is, if it were the case, if it were genuinely the case biologically, then, and if masks work, I mean, like if all those talking points really lined up and really corresponded to physical reality, then the emotional reaction of why don't those other people want to just wear a mask and help others, then it makes logical sense. Like the problem is that all those talking points have nothing to do with reality, and that is where it's their responsibility to do research and to actually look into that instead of just believing television. But then the logical ability is of course murdered by those whole coordinated marketing campaigns. So I'm in kind of like in two minds about it. Meaning, on the one hand, I'm like, oh my god, when are they going to wake up? Why? This is so absurd. This is just so absurd. And especially the kids. When I see toddlers in masks, that breaks my heart. But then I'm thinking, okay, because can I convince millions of people by just saying you guys are wrong? I mean, no, I can't. That's just not how it works. So then you kind of, first of all, you take care of your own soul, because it would not be any good that if we went crazy, if we went just like too stressed about it. So you just try to put things into perspective and again trust the universe and do your best. So it boils down to the same very simple, non-glamorous thing. So, but it is absurd, and they have gotten away with much. And even if you observe this whole mask narrative, how it evolved from don't wear it, you're a bad person if you wear it, and then absolutely wear it, and you're a bad person if you don't wear it. I mean, the biology clearly
We're two,
didn't
we're
change.
three.
Right, like we're two, we're three. I mean, just on that count alone, it is absurd. But then, of course, the brain is very good. And the brain is very good at finding ways to explain reality in such a way that you are still smart. And for a modern person, it's extremely important to feel smart. That is kind of the fundamental, like to be smarter than others, to actually have the coherence, perceptually speaking. So the marketers upstairs are using it in a very coordinated manner to attack all of our perceptive systems. So I don't blame those old punks in masks. I weep. I I think it's heartbreaking. But I'm just another human being, and hopefully they'll come to terms with the reality sooner or later. I mean, they better, because then we are going to wear smart masks, and it's not going to be pretty for a while. And then it's going to be good. Like in the end, where I'm optimistic is the ultimate outcome, because no matter what happens, at some point there's going to be a revival and there's going to be healing. I'm just hoping that this point is sooner rather than later, and in the kindest way. And that's what I pray for.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Thank you. Back to the Rachel Maddow thing. One of the things that I thought about was about the whole RussiaGate and anti-Russian narrative is similar in many ways to how the right has had the anti-China narrative, and now they're going on about there's all this violence and discrimination against Asian people, Asian folks, but it's kind of the flip side of the same coin of what they were doing on the Russia thing for years and years. I mean, right? I mean, that's just
Oh, absolutely. And again, politicians use any slogan to distract us from what they are doing. And I am sure that geopolitics is happening as we are talking. It's happening every minute. And every world leader, the way I look at it is, it is true that every world leader is trying to get against every other world leader. And at the same time, they all want to eat us. So they are in cahoots with each other as far as their desire to eat the peasants. And at the same time, there's internal rivalry. So, and I'm sure that people who pay for, wars and who make money from wars, they genuinely don't care about it. So they could be like siding with China today and then siding with America tomorrow or yesterday rather, or siding with Russia or whatever. So I mean, like, all that is probably real because politics is real. Like people are trying to pull the blanket on the high political level, and they always spy on each other. They always try to steal from each other. That's real. At the same time, it doesn't really change the big picture that much because the feudal overlords are trying to eat us anyway. And I had some really funny story that I forgot. I will think of it.
Maybe you'll think of
So
it.
yeah.
So tell me about your music and how that plays into your work.
Well, my music again. I've been doing music since 5, and I've been actually writing songs about what's happening now, and that's trippy because I'm even looking at the lyrics that I wrote several years ago, and sometimes even 10 years ago, and all of a sudden it describes what's happening today, and I'm like, I didn't mean it as an instructional manual, thank you, and uh, so I've been thinking about this whole transhumanist robo culture for a while. I never thought that it would become reality, or at least attempt to become reality that quickly. So when I was writing songs about it, I was pouring my soul. I was talking about all the things that worried me as something that is coming in the future, what they're trying to do, this whole isolation of human beings from one another, the technology as something that's going to separate us, and all the tricks. But I did not think it was going to happen. And now it's almost like I want to do new music. I want to do music of joy and happiness. So it's very very it's creepy almost because my songs talk about what's happening now. I mean, like it's really really strange to me. I did not mean it to be this way. I really didn't think that it was going to happen.
Still the sky and give back the disease. So eaters, so eaters. There's no soul. Ask the scorer. Chew your content. Wear your collar. There's no soul.
I also remember the funny story. Not, or maybe not funny, but speaking of trying to understand the other person, I was doing just before this whole pandemic situation happened. I was doing events with a specific purpose of gathering together people with opposite perspectives and then talking about it. But the condition that I was putting on that was that the story had to be personal, so that it would have to be emotional, meaning that subjective, personal, first person story, not social analysis, not like brainy, not smart talk, but actual first person story. And then people would offer perspectives, and the deal was that there has to be respect, even if people disagree. So I mean, like there was this whole thing that I was doing. And to test that on myself, I invited one of the speakers who was a transhumanist, like proper transhumanist. And he shared his perspective, and of course I didn't agree with any of that, but in the end there was a human connection, and I almost like, oh, that works. I mean, the format works. And then I got to actually have very warm feelings towards my fellow human being who happens to be a transhumanist. That was extremely interesting. Like to me personally, subjectively, it was very very interesting experience. And I still disagree with him, but it was valuable to me to see beyond the ideas and to see the soul. And I would still disagree with him. I would still do things to not let transhumanism happen as the way that I can go at it. But it was extremely interesting.
Do you think he had a similar feeling about you, like the connection to, or maybe even like seeing your side of things a little bit?
I think so. I think we both took each other, like we kind of like laughed at each other's ideas, but it was totally humanly cool. Like like we all went to have a drink, like all other panelists. It was fine. I don't know if I would have the same experience with, say, Bill Gates, because I think he's on his own, like he's not here. And I don't think he wouldn't talk to me probably in the first place. But I I don't feel hatred towards him either, by the way. I don't feel hatred. I think what he's doing is awful, and I think that he's extremely broken. But again, he is serving his purpose of waking us up. And if we do our job, then I think those people have nothing on us. There's like maybe a few hundred people with that kind of mentality in the entire world, maybe a few thousand at most. And billions of us, we have the power. And the problem is that a lot of people are not really aware of it, or they're yelling at another fellow peasant, or they're concerned about completely different things. But if we are to wake up to our internals, they have nothing on us.
Yeah. When I hear people say this all the time, that talking about the technology and kind of where everything's headed, and they always say, "Oh, it's inevitable. It's just inevitable that this is going to happen." And I'm like, "No, it's not. It's not inevitable. I mean, all it takes is for people to stop believing in it. Like, stop believing in the philanthropists, stop believing in the politicians, and stop believing in these stories, and to start writing a new one." That doesn't mean I'm like, okay, here's the answer. Like, people are always like, well, what's the answer? I'm like, I don't have the answer. I know like pieces of what could help us shift into a different direction. And I'm even open for debate about that. But I think the first thing that needs to happen is for us to reject this force, this thing, this power that is brutal. It doesn't appear to be to many people, because they're getting, it's providing food and shelter for them or whatever, but it's not providing happiness. That's for sure. And
Well, yeah. And I think it's complex, because I think it's unfair to demand that people reject something that feeds them without offering an alternative. I think
that's
the
a good
bigger
point.
picture, again, like, it boils down to the same thing. I think that the bigger picture gets resolved beyond our understanding. I think that, there are two things. First, just because of what you said, there's a really brilliant documentary. It's called Plug and Pray. And it's about Joseph Weizenbaum, who was the inventor of ELIZA, which ELIZA was kind of the first AI program. And it was very primitive back at the time, but it was the first one. And he was a decent human being. So he invented it because he was a scientist and that was interesting to him. So he expressed his creativity. But he did not intend it to be used in ways that are not ethical. And what was done, so when he came up with this, it was kind of a talking, obviously in typing, because it was, back when, but so psychoanalysts started using that as a means of like talking to a person. So the person would type in answers or questions, and then the program would talk back as if it were a psychoanalyst. And then what happened then, people started emotionally connecting to this program. But then Joseph Weizenbaum, who invented it, he was specifically warning against going the truth. He was like, no, like, that's a program. That's not like, don't, like, it's just software. It's like, it doesn't really talk to you. But then, of course, because it could be used commercially, then it all went the wrong way. But he spent years trying to counter that and trying to talk about the choices. And there was, in the documentary specifically, there's a scene where he is at a conference, and he is known. I mean, he passed away, but he was very well known, and he had a status and mainstream status as an inventor of this thing. And at the conference with some younger people, and he is saying, like, what are you talking about? Like, trends? Nothing is inevitable. We choose what happens. We don't have to choose something that's not good. We don't have to choose something that's not ethical. And they just kind of laugh him off. Well, I mean, they don't laugh, but they just don't pay attention. And that, I think, is extremely telling. And nothing is inevitable going this way or that way. Technologically is not inevitable. But again, I don't even think it's about technology per se. I don't think that it's about this technology or that technology. It's about abusing it. And until people figure out the thing on the inside, like it almost, like whatever we have, we're going to abuse collectively. And tagging on that, there's another conversation that I get into all the time, and sometimes people disagree with me strongly because depending on their beliefs, but I don't think it's about any ism. There's a very popular thing where some people say, oh, it's about capitalism, like capitalism is horrible. And then some people say this Great Reset is Marxist or whatever, communist. And I think neither is true. I think that for one, technically speaking, and that is the part where people sometimes argue with me, but I think that communism per se, it doesn't exist. It is just really monopolistic capitalism because, and I come from, the Soviet Union, so I have the first-hand experience of this bullshit. And so the idea is, of course, that it's always the marketing, that it's power of the people, that it's power of the working class and whatnot. But it's not what happens in reality, and it cannot happen in reality until the internals are fixed. And so this narrative of factory to the workers and land to the peasants, that was all marketing by the Bolsheviks in the Soviet Union. They used it for own power. They just put people against each other. The society was restructured, and there were many problems in society, but they were not really solved. So what happened was a restructuring which put a different group of people in power, and they abused it, and they were wealthy, they lived well, and then everybody else was starving. So because of that, I think that, again, in practical terms, communism is just a super monopolistic version of capitalism. And neither ism is good. And the problem, and for instance, both Soviet Union and Western countries that were capitalist did very similar things in terms of abusing people and the environment. Like there were tests of nuclear tests that were unannounced to people that caused health problems and lives, and there was massive abuse of environment in very parallel directions. Actually, they did very similar things under different systems with different motivations. While in the Western world it was driven by money and profits largely, and then in the Soviet Union it was driven by egos, people thinking that I'm a scientist and know better, so I can cause this havoc, and I'm a scientist and I'm right anyway. So, but humanly it was coming from a very similar hubris and from a very similar state of brokenness. And if you think about it, so even though in the Soviet Union most people were poor, and there were some good things, there was this, if everybody's poor, then you don't suffer too much about not having a lot. I mean, you still need the minimum, but then you don't get obsessed with money. So I mean, that was kind of a positive. But then, for instance, when I talk to people who are older than me, coming back from the time where they were really poor, by the time my generation came around, honestly, everything was fine. We had stuff. But early generations were really, really struggling. They were genuinely very poor, and they suffered. And they really, really suffered. And so this whole fairy tale of country for the people, that was bullshit. That was marketing. Similarly, what they're trying to sell today with sustainability and equity and all that is very, very similar marketing. Even the visuals are similar. And interestingly, and I know that I'm kind of rambling all over the place, so you can edit it if you want, but a couple of years ago, I watched a bunch of films that were Soviet films from the 50s, 60s, when they were doing this whole march of science and technology and trying to modernize everything. And it struck me that even the language was extremely similar to what big tech is doing, or this whole religion of science of today. And that was before the pandemic, but it only gotten worse since. But so college-educated city people going to the village and telling them that they should stop doing farming the way they know, that they should use pesticides, and that is the modern thing. That is the proper, correct, educated way of doing that. And if they're opposed, then they're backwards and they're uneducated, and they should be ashamed of themselves and just stop it and just leave their ways behind and just use the pesticides. And if they do breastfeeding, they should also stop because they should use the mixes. And so that was a long time ago. That was in the Soviet Union. That was allegedly for the people. That was not capitalist. So the problem is not, in my view, the problem is not an ism. The problem is not something that we call capitalism or socialism or communism or whatever. The problem is the relationship with nature, and the broken relationship with nature also comes from the brokenness on the inside, and it kind of feeds each other. It's like a two-way brokenness. So the answer, the way I see the answer is that we have to undergo some kind of a transformation internally, and perhaps because things are so weird and so oppressive, and maybe this is the way we get to see what kind of horror we're going to deal with if we don't address our internals. And I don't know how many people think about it this way. I am not technically super optimistic, because I think that human nature is to deal with things only when it's unbearable. So, and I really, really pray that things don't get unbearable, that we deal with it in the kindest way. But I do think that it is an opportunity to, for a spiritual awakening. And I'm kind of aware of this phrase because, this phrase has been used by, it has been made cheesy. I mean it not in a cheesy way. I mean it in a very biological, like in a very, very, very physical way. But I think it is a time for that, and I think that we really need to do that. I don't know if it made any sense, but
Yeah, so I actually, I want to do a whole show all about the titles or the labels that we give the systems. Like you said, capitalism versus communism, and now there's a group of people online that are really pushing the name humanitarianism, and I've kind of looked into it, but I'm reluctant to kind of take on this new title simply because I don't think these things. I think they actually muddy the water. These they don't really tell us what's actually going on, because what we really have are hybrid systems. It's like part this, part that, but at the end of the day, it's all just about power and serving power. And there's, like you said, there's different marketing techniques that are used. But yeah, it seems like these labels don't really serve us well anymore. And I think we just need to just talk about what's actually happening rather than, slapping a brand on it or whatever. But so yeah, that's interesting what you say about that. I totally agree.
I agree with you, and I try to stay away from those conversations about isms. I mean, if I get pulled in, then I go in and I, express my opinion. But that is one of the things where people get really pissed, and it is very interesting. Then again, it goes back to this fanaticism situation where like people can't agree with me completely on this whole pandemic thing, and then if I say something that is like Great Reset is not Marxist, which I don't think it's Marxist. I mean, like Marx came up with a reasonable explanation of economy. That's a good thing that he did. Everything else, he was dependent on Engels, and that's kind of like, as a Soviet person, I mean, I can joke about it all I want, but we had folklore, like jokes about Marx and Engels and Lenin, all those figures. But like Marx, really, he depended on Engels, who had the money. And then he was a poor philosopher dependent on a person who actually was a capitalist. So, I mean, like, that whole thing was ironic. But anyway, I mean, you can even edit it out if you want. I mean, I completely...
No, I think that's a good point, though. That's interesting because, like, the overlap of all these things, too, there's nothing that's pure in any of this discussion, because there's these things, like, seep into one another. Like you said, he was being supported by Engels.
No, I mean, like, I know, but I mean, like, people, life is not, I think pure is what we have in the heart, hopefully, and that's what we want to grow in us. But the whole arrangement, I mean, like, it's kind of like funny, not funny. But there's actually a very interesting work that, for whatever reason, people like to argue about it too. But there's an article by Russell Means, and it goes specifically about capitalism versus Marxism, or rather the fact that there's no versus, that from indigenous perspective, they're both fucked. And I tend to agree with him. And I know that people sometimes, they think he's a controversial figure, but whether he's a controversial figure or not, I think he was a wise man, and I think people do a lot of things in lives that you can make anybody sound controversial, non-controversial, depending on how to pick things. But that aside, I respect him. God bless his soul, and may he be in a good place. But the article, I think, is genius. It is really, really brilliant.
I use the term capitalism all the time, even though I know it's not necessarily useful, because people have a different understanding of what that word means. Like when I say it, I'm really talking about this fiction of money and the fiction of property, especially in terms of absentee landowners or property holders, or but it gets, some people think, well, I'm just running a business and that you're talking about me, and I'm really talking about this other entity. But even with the Marxism, capitalism, or even socialism, they operate on money, and there's a lot of the same, whether the government controls all the land and then distributes it versus, a corporation or a religious institution. It seems like there are definitely some overlap there between those things. It's just a matter
Oh, absolutely. And I'm pretty sure that for some reason the ideas of Marxism and communism, and my heart weeps. Like, honestly, as somebody coming from that country where the people really paid the price for that system. And I mean, like, system, it's not because capitalism is better or worse, it's just that that system also is pretty horrible. So people pay the price with like heavy. So my heart weeps when I hear people of the college students go like, "Yay, let's go Marxist, like proletarian revolution and all that." I'm like, people, you have no idea. But and they're sincere, and I cannot blame sincere people. But they also get very aggressive, and but I'm sure that if those people, they somehow imagine a world in which they would be in charge. They think that their brilliant ideas would put them in charge, but it's not how it works. They would not be able to survive for a day in that society. They're too entitled and to spoil. I mean, like, they're just like used to different levels of comfort, many. And I don't want, again, I actually don't like, so maybe I wouldn't even air that just because it does not express exactly what I mean. Like, they're sincere people. They mean something good from the heart. But the whole that boils down to fanaticism. They think that they will be in a world where they will be calling the shots, that they will be calling the rules, and that they're going to be the rules are going to be more fair. But that's not realistic at all, because then if they discover, that was actually a story from when the Bolshevik Revolution happened. So let's say it happened in 1917, and then in the 1920s, some people, even Americans, who had very idealistic ideas about this, because capitalism, it has lots of horrible things about it. I mean, that's true. So they had ideas, romantic ideas about the Soviet Union, and they would come or like move and discover themselves in dystopia. And so that is a very horrible way to discover something, especially when you believe in something as pure. And I do think that if those college students who genuinely believe in the ideas of Marxism and all that, if they were to find themselves in a world where it's reality, they would be very disappointed. And I would not wish it upon them, because I know even what happened to the generation of my grandparents in the Soviet Union, they were the generation that really took it in. They believed in it. They believed in it with passion. They had the hard lives. They fought in the war. They made great sacrifices. I mean, like, I admire them, their strength and their courage, and what they had to deal with, what they had to live through. And then by the time they were old, the whole thing crashed, and it became common knowledge that it was a lie, that it was marketing, that it was just like a horrible lie and bloodshed. And in a way, that generation was tossed out. And dealing with that at the end of your life is not good. So I fear that whatever is happening to the excited generation of today, people who are, say, like 20, who go around talking about Marxism and Leninism, and like, fine. I mean, like, they can say whatever. I mean, I'm happy to give them a hug, and even though I disagree and I think that's appalling, but I mean, I'm still, and young people are passionate. That's normal. When you're 20, you think you know everything. But at the same time, I fear that they're going to discover that they were had, that they were lied to, and that they're going to be bitterly disappointed. So I I feel like I want to forewarn them. I feel like I can't because people usually only go with their channels. So I don't know. Like I went off really far, but
No, that's all right. But it's interesting because I mean, if they knew their history, they would realize that time and time again, those revolutionaries end up being taken out very shortly after the revolution happens. A lot of them, you know, a lot of the idealistic people, they're basically just used as cannon fodder. And then once the power dynamic has shifted, then they dismiss all those people. And I think actually a lot about the trying to think of the guy's name. There's a documentary called How to Start a Revolution. There's a guy named Gene Sharp. Do you know who Gene Sharp is?
no idea.
He's funded by the Open Society Foundation, George Soros,
Oh,
and they've been involved with, you know, helping to foment these color revolutions all around the world. And they get these young idealistic people, whether they're in support of LGBT or they're support of different things,
right.
you know, economic liberty, political freedom in these different countries. But at the end of the day, what they're actually just trying to do is they want to overthrow the current order. They,
Of
you know,
course.
it's the people out marching in the streets. They're not going to have any say in shit once, you know, the establishment's overthrown. They're just basically there to create the destabilization necessary for the overthrow. But that's the extent of it. Another thing that I thought about when you were talking too is the difference between actually looking at the world empirically versus theoretically. And I noticed a lot of, I mean, one of the earliest books I read about like political philosophy, which I loved when I was in high school, I read a book called The Worldly Philosophers. And it was just kind of a quick overview of the different economic philosophers from, you know, Karl Marx to, I can't even think of, anyways, they go through a whole bunch of them, but it's called The Worldly Philosophers. But I realized that a lot of this is actually based in theory and as opposed to actual like empirical evidence. And I see that with people on the left. And I also see that even with people on like the libertarian capitalist side. They have all these theoretical ideas about markets and what they'll actually do, but they're not connected, and money and property, but they're not actually connected to how the world actually operates, how the world really works. It's all theoretical. And I think that's a problem, you know, when you're basing your worldview more on theory rather than observation. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know it. I agree with you completely. And I think again, this is the root of it, the way I see it, and I'm sure it's far more complex. But the way I think about it as of this second is that we all have this desire to be accepted and recognized. We all want to be seen for who we are and appreciated. And ultimately, we are seeking that is an instinct. We are seeking respect from the community, right? So the society today is set up in a way that we don't get respect. Even if people who are successful, they get their asses, you know, licked for being famous or rich or whatever. It's not them. It's not their essence that is being respected. It's the fluff. So everybody carries this hunger of being respected and being seen and being recognized. And because it's unsatisfied, it finds its way into the world anyway in all sorts of distorted ways. So it's almost like, you know, the teenager who's doing crazy things just because like see me, recognize me, please, like I am here, I exist, see me. So I mean that's what's happening. But that's because everybody is carrying this teen angst, this desire to be seen and recognized, and but nobody is actually doing not nobody, but very few people are actually seeing others. That's why we have this whole society filled with hungry people trying to do outrageous things to get attention. And again, like solutions are significantly more difficult than just even describing the problem. And then, but I think about solutions because I think that makes sense. So the more we try to listen to others and see their soul, then we kind of collectively mitigate this hunger. And at the same time, we feel good because then we connect to other human beings and maybe they see us too. Like for instance, in the artistic path, I discovered like originally, the Western artist is a hungry person, meaning hungry for attention, and you do things and you perform and you hope that people like you, and you try to adjust your performance to how people like you more. And I remember I did an interview one time. I'm so ashamed. I think it didn't air. I mean, I hope it was lost somewhere. But I was so anxious to sound likable, and I said things I didn't even mean. And I was like, the moment it was done, I was like, what did I do? Like, why? But this is how a lot of artists are. And then eventually, I realized that people who like people who listen to your music, I mean, like ultimately they want to be heard. They are human beings. They have a soul, and they want to be heard. They want to be heard. And an artist realizes that the artist's job is to heal and to see other people and to help to elevate other people, to help them be the better version of themselves with love. And that's a much tougher job. But I think that all of us, in our place, wherever we are, whatever we do, we have this capacity to elevate others. And I mean it in a non-cheesy way, because that language too was stolen. So elevate others in a way that does not deny own spirit. Like protecting own spirit is primary, but you find ways to elevate others and to hear them and to see them in a way that kind of builds the community for real, in a non-cheesy way. And then the more people do that, then the less hunger there is collectively. And the less hunger there is collectively, then people are more grounded. Then even if somebody tries to disturb things, then it's harder to disturb things. And also, creativity gets expressed in healthy ways. And of course, what I described is a very big picture, and it is very idealistic in a way, but I also think that this is the only way. And then if people a lot more people are a lot more grounded, and the community exists in earnest, where there's no, oh, now I remembered what I was going to say. It wasn't funny, but it was actually important, so I'm going to say it. So when people come to realization that there's no contradiction between community and individualism, then we have a chance. Because if you look at, for example, how historically for millions of years people's community worked, there was a mechanism in place and a very deep understanding that a healthy community requires happy, fulfilled, healthy individuals. So if an individual is miserable or feels like they're not respected, that it immediately impacts the community. So even pragmatically, without any lofty ideas, without any intellectual morals, it is in the best interest of the community that individuals are taken care of, that they are respected, that they do what they were born to do, that they're in touch with their spirit. And when that is taken care of all the time, continuously, from one generation to another, and that when everybody puts in the work and everybody supports each other when situations are difficult or when people make mistakes, then it has a chance. Then if there's in a different paradigm, that it's either individual on top of everybody's interests, or usually bullshit communal values that is not even real at the expense of individual happiness, then it's both broken. But the choice itself, when you were talking about communitarian and this whole thing, so the whole paradigm in which individual and communal are opposing each other, I think that paradigm itself is broken, because the way healthy community works is like, I am happy doing what I do, and I'm very happy when I feel like my work is fruitful and it's helpful to others, and they are grateful, not in a bullshit way. And then I feel good, and then I try to do better, and then it kind of feeds both ways. And there are things that I don't want to do, but maybe I wasn't born to do them. Somebody else loves doing them. I mean, like that whole big picture, again, it's beyond human understanding. It's all taken care of in a way. We just need to do our thing. And then if the society depends on individuals suppressing themselves, which has been this way for for centuries, then the society is broken, and eventually it becomes worse and worse and worse, and it collapses. So, and I think right now we are dealing with a kind of a culmination with this brokenness, where the technology has gotten so powerful that it's destructive, like really destructive. But the principle of brokenness is the same it has been, like for a very long time. And maybe this technology exists to make us realize that we've got to, we got to get our shit together. So, what do you think?
Getting our shit together. That's an interesting idea. I'd never really pondered that, but that might be something worth looking into. Yeah, no, I think that's you. Sorry, you can't see my face. I need to so you can see my face.
No,
I'm
I mean, like, I
smiling.
had to figure out eventually that you were joking, but
Yeah, I was pondering. Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea, and I really like the way that you're trying to reframe this, because I mean I know I get real wrapped up in just like trying to wake people up. I'm like, no, you have to understand what the hell is going on, and just realizing that I can't make anybody do anything. At the end of the day, they're an individual person, and they're going to do what they're going to do. And I've always said this, even with people that are upset with people on the right. They have to come to it on their own. They have to figure it out, and you can't. I don't really believe like you can just send people to indoctrination camps or whatever. I mean, I think what needs to really happen are just a lot of very, very long, respectful conversations that are difficult, but really building back the human bonds that are being broken right now. And I think that idea and that message that you're putting out really can resonates with me, for particularly at this where we're at in the world today. As horrifying as it is. Yeah, I like it.
well, I'm glad, and I think that like one of the most important things, again, because dealing with family, I think it's important because that's our roots, and our families are not a coincidence. We and like we have to put work into that, and sometimes it's incredibly difficult, and nonetheless, I think that dealing with it is very important and showing people respect, even if it's very, very difficult. I think, again, we have a lot of work to do, and unfortunately I wish I could say, oh, I have this solution, you just have to, I don't know, like put a flower, and then it's good. But no, it's not how it works. Like, it's all work, it's all a lot of work. But the joy that shows up when you finally build the connections, I think it actually, well, it justifies everything. It feels very good.
Yeah. And this show is called If We Were Honest. And I think that's a really great foundation, a really great place to start from, is just, people bringing what they have to the table and just being honest and being, being open. And, yeah, we have a long way to go.
No, absolutely. And this whole American model of, it's kind of this inspirational talk. And I've actually, like, I've gone this route. I immediately didn't like it very much, but I mean, like, I did when I was studying marketing. I also did a dive into this whole like self-help circuits, like Robbins and all that.
Tony Robbins.
And
Yeah.
right, right. And but I mean, who knows what they started with? Maybe many of them started with something good. Like, what ended up, anyway. I mean, like, another topic for peaceful times. But there's this whole model which caters into American entitlement. And when I say American entitlement, I say it neutrally, meaning that you can't blame a person for having things good. And many American people, had things very good comparing to many other people in the world. So when life is comfortable, there's no motivation to look under the hood. It's just healthy reaction. Like, if your life is already comfortable, then why look under the hood? And so if there's this habit for getting things with relatively little work, then the whole concept of doing a lot of work for something, it's difficult to accept. And so then this whole concept of I don't know, doing something easy and then solving it. And I mean, like, that's what people pay the money for, right? If you give somebody an illusion, a part of it is good, a part of it is hope. Like, if you're a self-help guru, giving people hope, that's a positive thing. If somebody has no hope whatsoever, it's better they have hope.
I have a
It's better.
different view on that. I mean, I actually think I've said this
Oh,
before.
wait,
You
wait, wait.
know?
Let me finish this, because
Oh yeah, yeah.
that
Go
was
ahead.
part
Sorry.
one. So I'm like, I like to build this whole tower. Sorry. So a part of it, no, like, let's say somebody is like, they're considering jumping off the bridge, right? I mean, like, it's much better to give them some positive energy, but it really depends on where the person is at, because I think if the person is seeking something honest, I mean, that entire self-help thing is total bullshit, right? It's bullshit. It's actually misleading. But so if somebody's trying to find something real, then that misleading thing creates a, well, not really a placebo. What is the other word? I forgot. So surrogate, kind of like a surrogate.
Okay, yeah,
So,
surrogate.
and surrogate, and then having a surrogate as opposed to having nothing is sometimes worse, but it depends. Again, it's case by case. So maybe now I'm proving your point. So uh but then the way they do it, they kind of, they restore, they operate on symbols, right? And I think that, okay, here, because it's not easy to explain, so I came up probably with a better way. So maybe a little bit of like carrot in front of you is good in some circumstance. Maybe if somebody is just absolutely confused and lost, then a little bit of that push, maybe even cheesy push, is okay. It's good. It can be good. But then creating this reliance on fake symbols, that's where it gets bad. And in the, I've seen it actually happen everywhere, and I have no idea like where this conversation is going. But so even in say like in movements, people often start from a very good place, from a place of desiring to fix something, but then it's very easy to get used to your own talking points or to your own symbols, and at some point, I think inevitably there's this dependency between, I don't know, like your self feeling and the talking points or the symbols. And this is what self help people use as well. And as soon as the dependency is not between you and the real world, and instead between you and the symbols or the talking points, even the best talking points in the world, then I think when the degradation starts happening. And I've seen that happen, and it doesn't please me, and it's very hard to avoid, and it happened many times in history. So I think in practical terms, the way to counter that is to be constantly alert, and try to be alert even, your own. I try to do that in my own life, and it's not easy. Like when I notice that I become dependent on my own talking points, then I try to reinvent it or try to, like come up with something that is alive in that moment. And it is definitely not easy. It is something that requires constant like creativity and reinvention of like something alive. But I also think it's important, because the moment something alive becomes a talking point, then that is the moment when the decline starts. And then this is how history goes in waves. There's something good, some good intention, and then it becomes stale and it falls apart. And then some new force comes and eats the weak, and then this resistance that is coming from a good place, but then it becomes symbolic and sort of like self praising, and then it becomes stale because it loses aliveness, and then it falls apart, and so on and so on and so on. Does it make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. And that was kind of what I was going to say earlier. It's just like I think that the thing that I'm always guarding against is the false hope. And I actually also was into, back when I was into sales, I was also into like the self-help stuff, and I'd go to sales success seminars and all these things. I actually have seen Tony Robbins live with his baritone voice and everything. And you'd leave these events just like full of energy, and you're like, yes, I'm going to conquer the world. And then you realize like a lot of it was just based on just utter bullshit. And so, yes, you need to have hope, but you have to also guard against false hope. And so there's a lot of false hope and hope that's like really built on lies. And the phrase that comes to mind is the whole fake it till you make it. They would say fake it till you make it. And I'm like, well, that only goes so far. At a certain point you've got to be real, and like the balance between, where you want to be and what world you want to have, and having a vision and having hope for that, and also being grounded in the world that you're in. It's an interesting thing to navigate and to think about. And I've been on both ends of that pendulum, I guess you might call it.
No, I agree with you. I think what it boils down to, and well, that is actually a generalization that contradicts what I want to say, but things are subjective, and I think that we really underestimate the subjectivity of everything. Like the way actually everything in life is a habit. Probably even many biological things are kind of habits on a much grander scale. And our subjectivity is important, our subjective choices are important. And that's why lots of decisions they're not algorithmic, right? I mean, you have to figure things out in every situation kind of from the inside, and that is an alive way to go about it. And sometimes like almost psychological immunity, right? Like physical immunity. Like once you get good at something, then it's easier for you to figure it out, or there's some mechanism that you know. But it's very important to not turn it into a formula, because when it becomes a formula, then it can become stale and it can go a different route.
So you can find Tessa's work at tessafightsrobots.com, and another website she has is tessalena.com, correct?
Yes, and also my latest writing, especially the writing about this whole pandemic thing, is at tessa.substack.com.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of If We Were Honest. I'm Jason Bosch, and I want to thank Tessa for joining me in this wonderful conversation, and I want to thank you for watching. If you support this work, please consider making a donation. For those of you who watch this channel know that I don't really ask for donations very often, but it does help me do this work that takes a lot of time, and it also takes a lot of gear that I'm actually still paying on. I've got a lot of stuff that I bought to produce the work that I produce. So anything you can do to help is much appreciated. And also, if you can help me get the word out about these videos and these interviews, obviously a lot of us are aware of the fact that there's incredible amounts of censorship that's happening on YouTube, and suppressing of different channels and videos, and deleting channels. Luckily, I'm still around. But we could use your help by sharing these videos and telling others about them. And if you want, feel free to grab a copy of it and put it up on your channel. I'm not really all about protecting this. I just want to get these conversations out there and get some of this information out there for people. And one of the things I'll never do is I'll never put my content behind a paywall, because I want everyone to be able to have access to it, regardless of money. So yeah, thanks again for supporting me, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.